Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Saltworks podcast. I'm your host, Hallie Dye. If you were here with us last week and you heard the beginning of Jessica's story, you are so ready. You've been patient for a week too. I can't wait to share it with you. If you haven't, that might be something you want to go back and listen to. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but it does give background to what we're going to specifically be talking about today, especially in the realms of marriage. I can't wait to share it with you. Before we jump into the conversation, the part two, I want to share with you some partners for this week's episode. You know, it can be so hard to make medical decisions, and we don't even think about these things until they happen. But one thing that you can be sure of is Northeast Imaging. They are a patient-friendly diagnostic testing facility that is doctor trusted and patient preferred. They offer MRI, CT, X-ray, and ultrasound. Their friendly staff provides high-quality scans focusing on the delivery of exemplary care to the patient and their referring providers. It doesn't matter if you're using health insurance or you're paying out of pocket, they're almost always more affordable than local hospitals. They are conveniently located at 1703 Lammy Lane here in Monroe and open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So take that decision off your list and tell your healthcare provider you want to go to Northeast Imaging. Now, we all know that this is a really busy season. We're leaving the fall, we're going into Christmas season, running the roads with everything from festivities to school activities. And so there isn't always time to cook or meal plan. That's why Daily Press has fast and friendly service for your busy schedule, and they're made to order deli options for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And for your busiest days, you have both the fresh grab and go options and the open air cooler and hot to go box, as well as a wide variety of frozen take home meals and appetizers for those parties you want to go to, but you don't have time to cook. We can't forget about the baked good options and the fresh brewed coffee. Daily Press has 4 locations, making it convenient for you and your family, and they're open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. in all but one location. Plus, it's a family-owned business, so stop by Daily Press today. All right, if you haven't heard of the newest children's book, you need to, parents. Join Kip, a brave little box turtle, as he learns to overcome his fears through the power of prayer and trusting in God. When faced with unexpected challenges, Kip discovers that he's never alone. Centered around the verse Psalm 56:3, "When I'm afraid, I will trust in you," this book teaches children the importance of faith and the strength that comes from praying when they feel scared. Perfect for bedtime stories or family reading time, Kip the Brave Little Turtle inspires young hearts to be brave just like Kip. This book is best for any boy or girl between the ages of 4 and 8 years old, and it can be purchased from Amazon or the author's site, upfromthemuck.com. Local author and podcast host Brandy Bostick also exclusively sells the Kip plush doll, which makes a fun and cuddly addition to the book, perfect for Christmas gifts. And the doll and other merchandise can be found on the website upfromthemuck.com. And now, without further ado, part two. You've been waiting. I can't wait to share it with you, Jessika McKaskle.
So going back to this idea of surrender, right? Like the Lord has spoken to me in this song. I'm doing all the things, but primarily one of the scriptures that the Lord was revealing in my heart a lot during this time was Romans 7:18. And anytime like Romans, like, man,
I know.
this is going to be a real
Yeah.
cutting. It's not like Psalm, just really encouraging. And
Yes.
this was also like,
He is
okay.
my refuge.
So it says, "For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out."
Mm-hmm.
Like, hello,
Yeah.
that's what I want, right? I have the ability, right? I think, but do I really?
Yeah.
No, I don't. Which is, it goes back to what you're saying, that it's like, this idea of allowing, thinking that we can do it and
Yeah.
thinking that we can plan it all out, but also like, the Lord is also much more capable of knowing what's best in my life than I am,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And can see the next, like he has to order my steps because he can see the things coming that I don't.
Oh, yeah.
There's like actually nothing in my control.
Yeah.
um, I You've mentioned like if you don't pardon me saying so, but
Sure.
like you didn't have a whole lot of compassion for yourself
Oh, no.
or grace for yourself.
Oh, no.
And that, what I have learned is I either have those things for myself and others, or I don't have them for either.
Mhm.
And the truth is, like, we can't produce compassion and
No,
grace from ourselves.
no.
We have to extend it to ourselves,
Mhm.
but it has to come from the Lord
Yes.
first and
Yes.
foremost. What
Mhm.
did that look like for that, for you to allow Jesus to permeate your life like that? And how did that affect your relationships with others?
So, at this time in my life, I began to just tell Jordy, like, there's something, like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm
Hmm.
burnout. I can't do this anymore. Like, I need your help, and I need you to help me figure out what to do. And so, um, the best thing for me at that time, and I'm a huge advocate for now, and we're literally on a waiting list, is counseling.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people use that as a last resort. And at the time I did, I was desperate for help.
Have
It was
you
like,
been listening in to our conversations that aren't recorded?
no, actually, I have not. And so I began counseling for the
Mhm,
first time in a real way. And I
mhm.
mean, Jordy and I had done like premarital counseling, but that was about it. We had never,
Yeah.
so we just decided to do it together. We needed to figure out how to communicate to one another about the things that we're struggling with.
Mhm.
And I needed to figure out like what was going on with me.
Yeah.
I mean, I just didn't know.
Mhm.
And so in counseling is where I learned to extend grace to myself.
Same.
And I was like, well, I am. I extend it to other people, and
Mhm.
I extend it to my kids and my husband and church members and people around me. And my counselor was like, yeah, but what about you?
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Remember? Like,
Mhm.
I'm fine.
Mhm.
Um,
Grace for what?
yeah,
Exactly.
I have it together, like, um,
Yeah.
and at that time when I literally said out loud, I I don't have to do that today.
Yeah.
I don't have to do that right now. If this messes up, it's okay.
Mm.
If I don't read my Bible today, I am still loved by the Lord.
Yeah.
If I don't want to connect with Jordy emotionally, physically, then he still loves me. If I don't put, Piper in these
Mhm.
clothes and she doesn't act, and she acts this way in front of
Mhm.
these people, then
Mhm.
I'm still a good mom.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know that that could happen. I
Mhm.
didn't know that I could fail and mess up and not live up to the expectation and still be loved and
Mhm.
accepted and wanted
Yeah.
by God, by my kid,
Yeah.
and by my husband.
And like so often we approach the Lord with the quote unquote big things.
Right.
I have this past I need you to cover and I need you to
Mhm.
fill and redeem, and
Oh,
like
yeah.
that's so important, and like we can all relate to that to some extent, but like that is what it looks like for your life to be changed.
Yes.
That is what it actively looks like
Mhm.
to take your thoughts captive
Oh, yeah.
and make them obedient to
Yeah.
Christ.
Mhm.
That is where life changes, and it's not just savior, it's also Lord of right now, over the
Yes.
way that I mother, over this decision, over this, pattern in marriage,
Mhm.
everything.
And it's this idea that, like, I don't need you to just fix me. I
Mhm.
need you to lead me.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I and that's kind of what happened in this time is that, like, that the expectation started to not feel up here because, for perfectionism and perfectionist,
Mhm.
we set this goal, right? And
Yeah.
we get close to it, what happens? It goes higher.
Right.
It's totally unachievable. So
Yeah.
all of these goals and all goals, let's just
Yeah.
parentheses around that, like,
Yeah.
they weren't really goals.
Yeah.
They were expectations that I thought that I needed, and so
Mhm.
when I would get close to achieving it, then the expectation would change and it would get higher, and I never knew
Mhm.
that I was literally trying to achieve the unachievable.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
It didn't even, like, cross my mind.
Mhm.
And so for the first time when I started counseling, I felt so free.
Yeah.
I this pressure
Yeah.
was gone, and
Mhm.
just like, so this is what it feels like to be
Right. Yeah.
normal,
To
right?
have life, in abundance, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I learned a lot during that time of just like control at its root is anxiety.
Mhm.
And I did not know that I was
Mm.
feeling this idea of inadequacy and chaos and panic. And in a sense, pre inside out, like we thank you for that inside out, by the way. I didn't know how to reset my control panel
Yeah.
because that is all my brain knew is that this is what we do. When it's situations where I don't feel like
Mhm.
I'm in control, this is what we do. This is how we function. And and I didn't know that you could change that. And you can.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this quote. I shared it on social media recently that it was not even a sermon about control or anxiety. It was about spiritual warfare, but it was a Tim Keller sermon, and he made the statement, and I literally stopped and like flew to my paper and pen and wrote this down. But he said, how did he say it? Worry is essentially pride
Oh yeah.
because worry is saying, I know how today ought to go, and I'm afraid God's not going to get it right.
Right. Yeah. Like I trusted God.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I thought, I'll have this planned out just in case what you have planned for me fails,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
that sounds so stupid
It,
when you
it
say
like
that out loud, but
when
it's
he
like,
said it, I was like, that is ridiculous. But sometimes I think we need to see, like, I absolutely love and highly everyone's homework listening to this
sure.
is to take those thoughts captive. Do you know what you think?
Yeah,
Do you know where you're operating out of your thoughts? Because they are driving your
yeah.
life.
What do you say about yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm.
I didn't know I was so mean to myself. Like,
Mhm.
my counselor asked me one time, like, "What do you say to yourself in times where you're not meeting this expectation?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know."
Mhm.
I mean, I literally did not know.
Mhm.
Why? Because I was just used to
Yeah, that
calling
wasn't an
myself.
option.
I just was used to, you know, being mean and being rude and hurting and inside that I just didn't know that
Mhm.
that wasn't it.
Right.
Like
Right.
it was shocking. I didn't know that you know, I've learned over the years that anxiety is still going to be there, right?
Mm.
And that's okay and it's normal and that's how it should be,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be
Driving.
driving my whole life. And I didn't know that other emotions could coexist at the same time, which
Right.
is why I love Inside Out 2 so much. Like,
Yeah.
literally, I keep going back to that. But, like, if you need a tangible, visible way of how your emotions work in your brain and how
Mhm.
to have them coexist at the same time and retrain your brain,
Mhm.
watch Inside Out.
Yeah.
And when you do it as a parent, you'll get a little bit weepy. I'm just
Yeah.
here to tell
Yeah.
you. Like,
Uh-huh.
and so, like, I learned how to literally take my thoughts captive, like, actually in real
Mhm.
time, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, I've always known this, like, I grew up in church. I'm
Mhm.
married to a pastor for crying out loud. Like, I knew these things, but I
Yeah.
wasn't doing it.
Yeah.
And so, like, in the times where I had this expectation of like, okay, Jordy and I are gonna go out, we're gonna go on this date, and it's gonna be awesome, and we're not gonna argue, and
Mhm.
it's gonna be like the best night ever, and we're gonna take pictures and put it on social media, and everybody's gonna like it. But what happened was, like, when we would start fighting at the restaurant, I would just automatically just start going back, and then it was like, "No, maybe he's not really trying to say this to me. Maybe I'm just receiving it different, right?"
Mm.
And, like, maybe and so, like, it's in that time where maybe you literally have to say, "Hey, time out. We've got to talk about this right now," because,
Mhm.
like, maybe it's in real time.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times for me, if it's not in real time, then I'm probably not gonna think about it again.
Yeah.
I may, and if I do, then I have cultivated on it so much that it's kind of created this humongous monster, and then it's, like, totally out of control at that point.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like, I need it to be in that moment, like, "What did they mean by
Yeah. Ask a
this?"
question.
You know?
Yeah.
And that helps me or when I'm not meeting this expectation that I've either given on myself or someone has given to me,
Mhm.
and I start that self-talk that is destructive, why am I saying that to myself? Why did I
Mhm.
call myself that name? I would never say that to anybody else.
Right.
I would never call anybody else the names that I call myself.
Yeah.
But it's so much easier to do for everybody else
Mhm.
than it was to do for me, you
Mhm.
know? And so, like, the same is true for myself. Like,
Mhm.
I get to live and be shown grace by myself too,
Yeah.
you know? And
Mhm.
and I just thought that that wasn't possible and I just had to function and thrive and
Mhm.
do, right?
We just like function so often, and if I don't meet these things that I think I'm expected to meet, then I'm not deserving of this
Oh,
love and
yeah.
grace and compassion. And like Jessica, like the honest truth is we aren't, but
True.
that's not his heart.
Sure. Yeah.
That's also not the truth.
Right.
You know what I
Isn't
mean?
that like the definition of grace?
Right.
Like getting what we don't deserve? Like
Yeah.
we don't deserve
Yeah.
grace. We don't deserve his
Mhm.
love. We don't deserve intimate time with him.
Mhm.
We don't deserve that. Yet
Yeah.
he does, right?
And he can, like, I think about the time that Peter was in jail and it was not looking good. He's heavily guarded. Jesus is gone,
Sure.
present, but
But like,
absent in body.
right.
And like an angel comes and is like, hey,
Yeah.
like, I've caused the guards, I think, in it to go into a deep sleep. This isn't Acts, but
Hmm.
and then
I think
like
you're right.
the chains fall off, like he's chained and guarded and what, like all the
Yes.
things. Angel comes in the night, makes all the
Hmm.
way, and Peter like gets up and follows him, thinking he's dreaming, and
Yes.
like kind of wakes, like kind of comes to outside the city gate, like, oh,
Like
this is
what?
real.
How do we, what
Yeah.
happened? Like,
Most vivid dream, um, but that's like a visual picture for me in the Bible where someone like could have stayed in chains because like what does it look like for me to leave? Like
yeah,
where do I go?
there's no other
What
option,
yeah, like
right?
what is safe? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know life outside of this,
yes.
right?
And so it's like he breaks those chains, but you have to decide to get up and walk
Yes.
out of it, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. You do. And in this time of, counseling and figuring my life out and allowing the Lord to work in my life, again, here
Mhm.
comes another song, right?
Yeah.
Um Maverick City Music
Mhm.
busted out. And I was like, what's going on with these people? And they wrote this little song, just it's just real little. It's called Gyra. You heard of it?
I might have heard it on occasion.
If you haven't remembered, the first line of this song is I'll never be more loved than I am right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, really?
And that's so like I don't know how your brain works, but my brain would have gone and actually and has actually on things like this. Is that true? Is that
Are you sure?
theologically true? That feels good,
The
but
next line says, I wasn't holding you up, so nothing I do will let you down.
yeah.
I like hello relief, right?
Mm,
I There is nothing, no matter how good or planned or in
yeah.
control, it doesn't change how the Lord feels about me.
Mhm.
It doesn't like make him more proud or love me more. He
Mhm.
loves me immensely right now, like today in
Yeah.
this chaotic world of Jessica and like Jessica. And I mean, like, he loves me.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we teach our children, right? Jesus loves me. This I know. Like, hello.
It makes the pressing into new wine kinder
Yeah.
when you realize he's not pressing me into new wine so he can love me more.
Right.
He's doing that because he loves me so
Yes.
much.
It's the same for our children, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's when we discipline our children, we're doing it because we love them, not because we hate their guts and they're annoying us and we are trying to get control of them, right? No,
Mhm.
like we want them to be,
Yeah.
you know, functional and awesome
Mhm.
and spirit led human beings, right?
Right.
And so, like, that change of
Mhm.
us happens because we are so immensely loved by the Lord.
Yeah.
And I God in that moment of that time revealed to me that even when I didn't make the expectation,
Mhm.
I was already enough.
Yeah.
I was already loved. I was already chosen.
Mhm.
I was already thought of. And nothing I did or didn't do
Mhm.
changes that.
Yeah.
And so, like, I just felt like that, again, some lyrics are, I will be content in every circumstance, right?
Mhm.
Like, that doesn't mean you like it and
Right.
that you don't want it to, be like this forever, right? But like,
Mhm.
that you trust him, that you allow him to know what's best for you. Like,
Yeah.
I think that as I've gotten older, I have forgotten that I am still a child of God,
Yeah.
you know, even though
Mhm.
I'm an adult
Yeah.
and that looks different. I mean, it's the same for my parents, like my parents don't parent me the same as if I were when I was 8, right? Like, but
Mhm.
they're still my parents. And that's still the same for the Lord. Like, he's still, I'm
Mhm.
still his child. He still wants what's best for me.
Yeah.
And he will still continue to mold me and change me when my flesh is is too much and I'm less like his son, or like, hey, let's change this up. Let's be more like Jesus, like
Mhm.
for your good and for my glory, right?
That like changes the way you think of childlike faith.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
because there is the whole element of like believing in the impossible
Sure.
because nothing's too wonderful or too big or
Yeah.
too hard for the Lord. But there's also this like, do you approach me with this childlike openness
Yeah.
and vulnerability of saying like, hey, come get me.
I need help,
Will you
right?
come for me?
Yeah.
And like that's a really hard thing for adults to ask.
Yes. Because it feels so immature,
It does. It
you
feels
know?
very small.
Oh, yeah.
It
And
makes me
that
feel small.
and that like the Lord doesn't want to do that with us, right?
Right.
So like when I think about our kids, right? Like when our kids are having a hard time, like, and again, like this all changes as they grow older,
Mhm.
as it should.
Yeah.
But like when they're hurt, what do? They come to you,
Mhm.
right? They
Yeah.
want love, they want affection, they
Yeah.
want your closeness, like, right? That's
Yeah.
what they want. And like at the end of the day, that's what we want too.
Yeah.
Like, we literally, like, my counselor was like, Jessica, you've got to think of God as your father. You
Mhm.
know that he's in control of your life
Mhm.
and that he's leading your life and he's predicting all the next steps in your life. But you forget that even at 36 years old, you are still a child of God and you crave that affection and love from him as if you always did.
Yeah.
And so I just, in those times, imagine myself just like, and maybe it's getting in a really cozy chair or in
Mhm.
a spot in your home or whatever, and you just literally rest and find peace in his lap. That feels so dumb to say out loud. I know that. But at the same time,
Yeah.
I'm desperate for
Yeah.
that.
We have to stop thinking of that need and desire as pitiful, but thinking of it as right.
Yeah. And
It's
necessary.
right and
Yeah.
necessary and good.
Yes. Yes. Like in the same way that I show my children that, that's how the Lord shows me.
Yeah.
And if there was this ever big idea at that time,
Mhm.
it was that
Yeah.
that, if I wasn't reading my Bible, if I hadn't read it all week,
Mhm.
like, does he want me to read his word? Yes. Does he want me to grow in that? Yes. Does
Mhm.
he want to reveal more about himself through or just some
It's
kind
a
of both?
random fruit fly. I don't
Um,
know. We don't even have any fruit.
does he want to reveal himself, to me in that way?
Yeah.
Yes. Does he want me to remain the same? No. But like, does he love me in spite of? Yes.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter if I've checked all the boxes. I am still loved. I am still chosen. I am still enough
Yeah.
in the eyes and the perspective of my father
Mhm.
because of Jesus, right? Like,
Right.
if you haven't received grace, you can't
Yeah.
extend grace.
Mhm.
You don't even know what that means. So, like, if you haven't surrendered your life to the Lord, you're never going to know what it feels like
Right.
to have grace extended to yourself and the ability to give grace to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so like that's where it is for me, where it's just like, how do we do this,
Mm.
right? Like how do we sit in this, and what does that look like um to in our real lives?
Right. And to walk that out.
Yeah.
What did that, you mentioned like a renewed marriage.
Mm,
What
yeah.
did that look like between y'all? Because you're
Yeah.
healing at the same time that's what's so interesting about marriage is like we're one.
Yeah.
And yet, like,
Hmm.
we're coming in with these different backgrounds, we're coming in
Right.
with different understandings, goals, even
Hmm.
expectations,
Oh yeah.
growing at the same time, needing different things.
Hmm.
And yet, that's the way the Lord's designed it.
Yeah.
Like, so what did that look like for y'all?
For us, like Jordy is just extremely patient. Okay. Let me just put that out there. He was so kind and patient with me. And you want to talk about undeserving, like he could have found love and attention and affection through 100 million different options at that point in our marriage, but he chose not to,
Mm-hmm.
and he chose to remain faithful to me. He's always been for me,
Mm-hmm.
even when I wasn't for myself. And he he just was there, and I never even knew like he was how immensely loved I was by him, even when I didn't feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I rejected him and became distant from him, like he was still very much coming to the Lord, asking him, like, please help me love her. Help me. How do I help her? You know, how do we move forward? And so like
Yeah.
we became very we at this point in our marriage we had moved back to Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
and we were serving in a church there. And what we didn't know at the time, things were going good, and we were doing our life, but we started. Someone told me about a podcast called One Extraordinary Marriage. Now, it's a great podcast, but I will give you like a preface. Like they are very open about a lot of things, and
Mm-hmm.
so like just listen carefully.
Okay.
So like don't take everything that they say like for 100%. That's what God says to do, because I'm not really sure about that. Like theology
Yeah.
is a little bit like, uh, great people. They have great practical tips for you,
Mm-hmm.
like as far as like how to be sexually attracted to your husband, and how to like, how do you have sex with your husband after you have a baby? Like, I mean, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
how do you pleasure your spouse? Like literally like all the things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But just be careful, because I don't know about a lot of the theology there. But I started listening to that podcast because at that point, like, I really didn't know how to love Jordy. I didn't really know like
Mm-hmm.
how to not have it together and love him at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, or how to have this new body
Mm-hmm.
and have sex with him, and how he would be desirable, like that, how he desired me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that those things could coexist.
Mm-hmm.
And so One Extraordinary Marriage podcast helped me just be intentional.
Mm.
Like if I'm not being intentional, then it's not important,
Yeah.
you know? And so like, and this idea of like just hoping that it will change,
Yeah. That is how we all live. What are we out here doing?
like
What are we out here doing?
Jordy, as much as I love him and an incredible person that he is, and he is also a sinner. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just newsflash that up a little bit. Okay.
This is breaking news.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
Like our marriage, like we are sinners together trying
Hmm.
to figure out
Right.
life,
Yes.
right? And so like we had to figure out how to live and how to communicate, because we
Mhm.
had lost all of that at that point. And so we had gone through a Bible study sort of thing, small group thing at one of our churches previously called Reengage. And I
Mhm.
know that that's a ministry kind of in the West Monroe area at different
Mhm,
churches and stuff.
mhm.
Jordy and I started one at Calvary at our previous church. And so like
Yeah,
wonderful, wonderful material.
yeah,
Um, so if you want to get plugged in with one of those, then by all means go for it. But um, something that we learned is just how to validate one another,
yeah.
right? Like in in the times where I felt like these things that were going on in my life were very insignificant to
Mhm.
things that were going on within the church or within our lives or whatever, like, they were still important to Jordy, and I never knew that. Like, I never knew to even, like, share with him how afraid I was to leave the house with a small baby, and she flipped out in front of everybody at church and how people might perceive me. Like, I
Yeah,
never thought that that was gonna happen,
right.
or how did people perceive me because we didn't post our kids on Facebook,
Mm,
and, like, what do people think about me because we chose to do that? Like, I didn't know I didn't tell him these things. I thought
mhm,
that he would just say, "Oh, Jessica, that's fine. Like, it's fine. Let's just,"
mhm.
or "You're so dumb for thinking that." Like, that's not how people are, you know? And so like
Yeah,
something that we also learned from Matt Barnhill is like, if I believed what you believed, I
mhm.
believe the same thing. Right.
Right.
And so like validating one another, giving space to be heard by one another
Mhm,
instead of trying to fix one another.
mhm.
So a lot of times, like when I would come to Jordy for things, just, you know, I wish I could lose 10 pounds, for example. Let's just say that. That felt so stupid to say out loud to him, like, Jordy, I don't feel like you should want me because I'm a little puffy. Right. Like, and he would be like, well, if I believed what you believe, I'd feel the same way too, right? We all feel that
Mhm,
inadequacy.
mhm,
We all feel that I don't feel good enough to be loved.
mhm.
It's so hard for us to receive love
Yeah,
when we don't feel like we deserve it
yeah,
from God and from our spouse.
yeah.
And so in those times, Jordy was very much like, I love you. Your body is so attractive to me
Mhm,
because it held my child.
mhm.
Like, I don't care that you see
Yeah.
this, but
Mhm,
this is what I see.
mhm,
And like, I never, I never thought that that
mhm.
could happen.
Yeah.
And so I would tell him, like, listen, I want to have sex with you, but this is how I'm feeling and I need your help.
Mhm.
And like, that's how we went into
Yeah,
it. Like,
yeah.
that feels really weird, I know, but like, it let him know where I was and it
Mhm.
let him know that it wasn't him.
Mhm,
It was
mhm.
me.
Yeah,
And I needed to be heard and
yeah.
listened and not fixed, right?
Right.
Because I didn't need him to fix it. I just need him to hear what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I was working on the fixing with my counselor and the
Mhm.
Lord and eventually Jordy, but at the same time, like,
There's a large difference in him sharing his perception with you and him trying to fix yours.
yes.
And, like, the healing aspect was hearing him say, "Hey, like, I totally am validating that you feel that way.
Yeah.
I believed what you believed,
Yeah.
but also saying, can I show you
Yeah.
what I see, what I
Mhm.
feel, what I believe?"
Yeah.
That's a lot different in saying like, "Hey, get over it."
Yeah. Like, "Oh, you're fine."
Yeah,
Like, I don't
because
see that.
validation is not affirmation of the belief that was
Right.
shared.
Right.
Let's just
Mhm.
establish that. And
Mhm.
I think we don't know the difference.
No.
Like, I'm not affirming, yes, Jessica, that's true.
Right.
I'm validating you're not crazy
Yeah.
for thinking that.
Yeah. But
You
this is what I
know,
really see, and
you're
this is
not
what I believe about you.
shameful for
Yeah.
struggling with that.
Sure.
Also,
But in spite of,
right,
right? You see,
right.
it goes back to this whole thing, like, in spite of the way that I feel
Mm-hmm.
about myself,
Mm-hmm.
this is how I am loved by someone else,
Yeah.
you know? And that in spite of aspect is mind-blowing, right? Because you're just like, how can this be?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You feel so undeserving and like Jordy should have been accepted and loved um a lot better than what I was doing for him at the time. Um but he was committed to me And, at the end of the day, you have to think about like, do I want you?
Mm.
And the answer for us has been yes.
Yeah.
I want you.
So how
No
do we get
matter,
there?
in spite of
Mm-hmm.
whatever else, like
Yeah.
I want you.
Yeah.
And that's it. And like I I hadn't felt that before,
Mhm.
by him,
Yeah.
or that I deserved it.
Right. Right. That it was a possibility.
Yeah. Like why would you want me? You know?
Um, can I ask you to speak to something that, I think could be freeing to someone? Like, what words of encouragement or wisdom or action do you have for someone that's like, I desire that, my spouse doesn't,
Mm,
or see it or understand it?
yes. Number one, you have to pray for your spouse.
Mhm.
You have to. You have to. I kind of wrote this down at the bottom of my notes here. I don't know where I heard this from. I don't know, but like God doesn't ask us to try harder. He just makes us new. And like no matter what you do to hope that your spouse is going to change their mind,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It does not matter what
Mhm.
you do. You will literally run yourself dead to the ground
Yeah.
in that pursuit. You have to ask the Lord to change, and you
Mhm.
have to do it constantly.
Yeah.
It should, if you want your spouse to change,
Mhm.
then oftentimes your spouse may need to be changing too, but it's also probably
Right.
you.
Yeah. I was gonna
Reengage
say, when you're praying those kind of prayers, it's changing you as well.
in the reengage world, the terminology is, if you want to fix your spouse, draw a circle around yourself and fix everybody in that circle first. And that feels hard because it's like, well, I'm a good person
Mhm.
and I'm
I'm at
doing
least trying.
and
Yeah.
I'm doing all the right things
Right.
and they're not doing anything. And that may be true,
Mhm. Yeah.
but at the same time, like, you can't change them.
Mhm. You're not missing the right words to explain it to them.
Right.
That's not what's happening. Like, I f
Right.
I
Like,
feel like we think like, "Let me rephrase it
yeah,
this way."
maybe you didn't hear me.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's one of those things, but really it's like, no, like this feels like a cop out sometimes, but it
Mhm.
really is
Yeah.
the Lord has to change them.
Yeah.
And at that time in my life, I would have probably told you that Jordy's the one that had the marriage problem, not me.
Mm.
But in reality, it was me. There were things in my life, control, perfectionism,
Mhm.
rejection, selfishness,
Mhm.
laziness. Um, those things were happening in my life. And because they were happening, they were spilling over into
Mhm.
all relationships, especially my marriage,
Yeah.
you know? And so sometimes I would tell you, like, yes, pray, but
Mhm.
ask the Lord, what can I do different?
Yeah.
How can I love them differently?
Yeah.
How can they see that I love them no matter what? Like,
Mhm.
that's one thing that the Lord never, like, if you pray, like, Lord, help me, no, help me love more, what's in my heart that needs to
Mhm.
change, that's never a prayer he's not going to answer.
Yeah.
Well, that's just not how it is in my life,
Yeah.
In my life, if I've like prayed and asked the Lord, like, Lord,
Mhm.
change my heart, like, in this way, to be different, to think different, to act different.
Yeah.
Um, he does. He answers that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know
So
if he ever gives a no on that one.
yeah, he's like, I think you're
Nah,
good,
no. Yeah.
And so I
Mm.
would say too that, like, ask yourself that question, like, do you want that person,
Mhm.
that spouse of yours, 30 years from now?
Mhm.
And if the answer is yes, then
Yeah. Yeah.
start the fight, start the walk.
I love your response because if you are in control of your marriage and everything, including your
Mhm.
actions and your spouse's actions, are within your control
Mhm.
and they're your responsibility and they're yours to change, then you don't have time to pray. Like, that's a
No,
waste of time. That's not, but
it's
if you
totally insignificant.
truly believe
Yeah.
that he is the only one that can change
Mhm.
you,
Oh, yeah.
your spouse, your situation,
Mhm.
the marriage, everything,
Yes,
then what else would you be doing?
exactly.
Yeah.
It's it feels like such a cop out sometimes, like especially in the
Mhm.
church world, like, oh well, have you prayed about it? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, no, no, no. Like,
Mhm.
have you really spent time praying? And I might
Mhm.
like tune this up a little bit,
Yeah.
is that have you spent time praying with your spouse
Mm.
out loud?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to talk about intimacy?
Yeah.
Like, I would venture to say that praying out loud with your spouse is as, if not maybe more
I
than,
would argue it's for most people it's more than because yeah, finish your thought.
because it could be more than vulnerable and transparent
Yeah.
than it would be to be completely naked in front of your
Yeah.
spouse.
The reason I would argue is that for most people it is because they'll do one but not the other.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, Jory and I don't bat 1,000 about praying out loud for one another.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't. I get we should probably be better again, but like
Yeah,
the Lord's
same.
going to have to
We
change us some more. Um,
Yeah.
but, and we need to become more intentional about that for sure. But
Yeah.
like being vulnerable
Mhm.
in a spiritual way with your spouse
Mhm.
has got to happen, especially if you're both believers. And especially if you
Yeah.
go to church together and or maybe you think your spouse is actually a believer and maybe you might learn that they're actually not, or that they're struggling with that, or
Right.
like
Mhm.
maybe you thought one thing and you're going to learn something different,
Yeah.
right? And so like um just be prayerful with God and with them,
Yeah.
and extend them grace. Like this is how this grace aspect plays out. So for example, I would ask Jordy, I need you to wash the dishes, put them away, load the dishwasher. Like, I'm just done. Like, I don't like washing dishes. So he'd be like, sure, I will. Well, I'd come back and like the things that I would put on the drying rack weren't there. And I would open the cabinet and see that like dishes that they don't go right there. They go over here, right?
Mhm.
And like, so what would I do? I would start becoming really critical. Like, Jordy, you didn't put these in the right spot. Like, I asked you to clean up the dishes and you're not doing it the right way.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, here's what happens is that he's trying to serve me.
Mhm.
He's literally doing what I asked him to do. Right.
Mhm.
And I have got to extend the grace to him that just because it looks different
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Right.
And like, that was so, so hard for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like Emily Jones, will say it's not really about the dishes. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
whatever you're arguing about the toilet paper being turned away is not about the toilet paper.
Yes.
Get to the part where what is it about?
Yes.
And for me, like I can relate to that to some extent. Like for me with household chores, like if I go through seasons where I'm like, whatever, yeah, everybody's doing their best, and then I'll go through seasons where I'm like hyper, like we got to be on top of it because we can't fall behind. And so like there will be different seasons that bring out different
Oh,
things,
yeah.
but like for me, it's like if you didn't do it the way I want it to, like, oh, he doesn't care.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he doesn't care. Like he
Right.
doesn't.
He doesn't care about the way that I do dishes
Yeah,
or that I
like
want him to.
yeah, and it's like I think in turn that can feel like, well, you think my needs or what I want or care about or whatever is insignificant.
Right.
It's and
Really.
he's like, I was just trying to do the dishes.
Well, this is just how I've always done dishes. Right.
I
Like,
put the forks facing up. I don't know.
yeah, I just put the dishes in there. I didn't know that
Yeah.
there was like a certain area for coffee
Yeah.
cups and a certain place for plates. Like, I didn't know.
I
Like,
have to say, I am the sociopath of dishwashing, and Andrew's not. He has a really good order, and I'm like,
just put it in
I
there.
put the bowls in here this time. Yeah, I
Can we
don't know.
get one more thing in here? Right.
Yeah.
I just think that there are, I've worked with Jordy and I've worked with a lot of couples over
Mhm.
the years. And it really plays out with women. Like, I don't mean to like be on it, but like we tend to be hypercritical of how our spouse serves us.
Yeah.
And y'all, like you got to let that go.
Why is that,
I don't
Jessica?
I don't know. Maybe it's because we're
Can you
used
write
to
that
like,
book for us, please?
shoot. Oh man. Maybe in my alternate life. We just, I don't know, maybe I think it's this idea that women have, like we have to be the runner of the house. Like we have to be the one in control of that our husband can't do that. They've got other things to do, work, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. And like, I don't know. Like, I don't know why we put that expectation on ourselves. Maybe it's because of social media. Maybe it's because of movies and books and
Yeah.
maybe what the Joneses want. I don't know. Not the actual Jones, because I
Yeah.
do know some Jones. I don't mean it like that, but
I mean, they do
just,
things well, but yeah.
keeping up with the beavers, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
it's maybe we just have this culture of that.
Mhm.
And I mean, how this played out in my life is that like if I wasn't giving our kids a bath, then they weren't going to get clean in the right way.
Yeah.
And that was so stupid. Okay. Like, and then it became this part of my life where I was like, Jordy, please give the kids a bath because I don't want to, number one. And I need a break
I
from them.
physically cannot.
I need a break from them, number two.
Yeah.
And number three, you've been gone all day at work
Yeah.
and they would love for you to have one on one attention with them. And so now I'm just like, can you please go get the children in the shower? Like,
I learned
and it's such a
this.
gift for me.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like,
It's a gift twofold.
yeah.
I learned this listening to Priscilla Shire, who no
Oh,
one would say
love
is
her.
soft spoken, no one would
Oh,
say is would shy away from
oh,
sharing what
never.
she thinks or,
Rock solid.
and you don't see her husband a whole lot. Like if you're
Right.
a woman in the church, you
Yeah.
know Priscilla Shire, you might not know
You
Jerry Shire,
you would definitely know her dad,
right. And
right? But like,
yes.
where's her husband? Is she married?
Right.
Like, what's
Yeah.
going on? Yeah.
And I think he is this really strong man of faith. Like he'd have
Yes.
to be for her to be able to do what she does.
Yes.
And have the support at home. But I heard her on the Perry's podcast recently, Jackie and Preston,
Mhm.
talk about how like she had to learn in parenting, especially with boys, and I think this is true for both,
Sure.
having both, where to pull back. She was like, I'm a
Mm,
loud personality, like I don't have any like,
mm.
and I would add to her words, she's a wise personality. She
Oh,
does know
for
good
sure.
ways and she
For
was
sure.
raised in good ways, but she had to learn not how to be more, but how to pull back because
Yes.
I believe that the Lord in his sovereignty gave them this dad,
Yes.
and like
Yes.
that was such a good. I mean, I don't feel like that's something I ever have like tried to fight against actively, but like I like picked up the phone recently and called him and was like, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
Like let me say out loud,
Yeah.
I want to be better at that,
Yeah.
like
I wanna be different at that. Don't
yeah.
put the pressure on
Okay, okay.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're right.
You wanna
You're
be
right.
different in that. You don't wanna
Yeah.
be better. You that will
Yeah.
change, right?
Yeah.
And then you'll just be running this rat race. It's like, I can't be better.
Yeah.
Why am I not better? And really, you just wanna be different. You just wanna
Yeah.
be different in
Yeah.
that.
I'm gonna do
So
that
be kind to
differently.
yourself, Holly.
Thank you, Jessica. Yes, I know. Oh my goodness. Okay.
But I mean, going back to Priscilla, like
Yeah.
her husband is like they have boys, all boys.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine what kind of precedence that sets for them?
Yeah.
Like, hello.
Mm-hmm.
Because what if they marry someone that is very much like their mom?
Mm-hmm.
And so now they know firsthand, like, this is how I need to
Mm-hmm.
act. This is how I need to empower her. This
Mm-hmm.
is how I need to support her.
Yeah.
Like, and may it look different from everybody else? Yeah. But guess what? It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, like, kudos to
So good.
Priscilla. You're
So good. I
spectacular.
know that's a great episode. So good.
I think I'm going to go listen to it.
Jessica, I feel like I could ask you 1,000 more questions, but is there anything before we close this episode? Because I'm sure we will revisit these topics
Yeah.
that you want to leave.
So I think that, this idea of refilling your spouse's love tank, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like every day when you wake up, all the things that you did yesterday to like fill up your spouse's love tank, guess
Yeah.
what? There's zero.
Oh,
Okay, there's no carryover.
that right there stepped on some toes.
Like it's so hard, right? Because you're
Yeah.
like, man, I did that yesterday.
Yeah.
He should be fine today. Well, guess
Yeah.
what? Are you that way? No,
Mm,
no, you still need to know, like,
yeah.
after 15 years that Jordy still loves me, that he still wants me, he still chooses me. I
Mhm.
want to hear that this morning,
Yeah.
like, so know that, your spouse's love tank,
Yeah.
like, zeroes out every morning. But
Mm.
also, we've got to be students of our spouse's needs.
Yeah.
And we have to take time to watch for those, and we have to take time to listen for those,
Mm,
because if we don't, someone or something will. Okay. And
yeah.
that may be, you know, literally like an actual person,
Yeah.
or it literally may be a total disconnect because of the aimless, thoughtless scrolling that can
Right.
happen on your phone.
Yeah, it could just be complacency.
Yeah. And so like and guess what? Those needs change
Mhm.
at different seasons,
Right.
right? And so like um just be mindful of that. Like make
Mhm.
sure that like you want to be an expert, PhD level
Mm,
of your spouse.
yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
And you don't want anybody like that's what drives me to refill Jordy's love tank all the time is that like I pride myself in knowing him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, well, you don't really know him. I do."
Mhm.
And like this is how I know him.
Yeah.
And so but watching and listening require something in common,
Mm.
and that is to zip your lips, right? Like, this is not a fix it moment.
Mhm.
This is, let me watch him. Let me listen to him. How does he interact with people? What's he saying that he loves the most? What is he saying that he desires the most
Mm.
and that he feels most loved by me? Maybe it's asking them, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
just having an intentional conversation with your spouse and you say, "Hey, listen, I I don't know how to love you well."
Mhm. We're in a
And
new place. We're in a new season.
yeah, like
Reassess.
let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And just so you know, like your love languages for your spouse change.
I do
Those are not
think
the same.
I think that you're right. We've discussed that before, and I think like if nothing else, one takes the lead in different areas
Yeah.
because that's you literally have different needs in this
Yes.
season.
Yes. And so like talk about those things.
Yeah.
And do that away from your children if you have children at home. Okay. Like
Mhm. Mhm.
so that means that you're gonna have to be intentional about dating your spouse. Like if you're not dating your spouse, someone else will.
Mhm.
Something else will.
Mhm.
And if those are things that you don't want in your marriage, then you're going to have to fight for that.
Yeah.
Okay. In the same way that we schedule like our kids' basketball or class or field trips or the holidays or whatever, like
Right.
you have to be intentional about that time with your spouse or it will not happen.
Jessica, I think that one of the biggest things that happens in marriage, and Andrew and I will tell you, like, we can be bad about this, but like, I don't want to say it, I don't want to say at least we're talking about it, but like,
Yeah.
but like, have some awareness is like your spouse will see you learn and love unconditionally your children.
Hmm.
And so, like, when you see your spouse with that capability of intentionality
Hmm.
and setting aside time and making a priority, and you see, like, oh, you're capable of that, you just don't want to.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing that happens, I
Hmm.
think. And we don't always know the words to put to that feeling,
Yeah.
but I think that's very real.
And sometimes I think what happens, especially like in my marriage, is like Jordy wanted to show me that
Hmm.
unconditional love. I just
Hmm.
wouldn't let him.
Yeah. Well, because you were so afraid of rejection, it's like, I'm just going to go ahead and self protect.
Yeah. And I was
Yeah.
like, and so like I just didn't need him to. Like I
Yeah.
just didn't allow him that
Yeah.
space to.
Right.
I never took the time to step back and say,
Yeah.
you know, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for loving me and thank you for just sitting with me in this mess and
Mm.
a lot of times that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I would say also too that social media and our phones and this idea of mindless activity
Mm.
is a huge factor
Yeah.
in making couples become strangers under the same roof.
Yeah.
And to piggyback on that, our kids. Okay, like I love them.
Hmm.
They're wonderful people
Yep.
sometimes, um, but they don't come before Jordy.
Yeah.
They don't. Why? Because number one, I'm not married to them. Number two, they're going to leave my house one day.
Mhm.
And I don't want them to leave. And I turn around and look at Jordy and be like, who are you again? My name
Mhm.
is Jessica.
Yeah.
I don't want that. So like if you're waiting for your kids to get out of the house to say, oh, well, we're going to fix this later,
Mhm.
that may not happen. and
Mhm.
it may be a lot worse than it is right now.
Right.
And so, like, be intentional. You
Mhm.
have to be intentional. And listen, at our house, our kids know, like, they know, like, when Jordy and I are talking, Jordy will be like, and or I, it just usually depends. He'll be
Mhm.
like, hey, whatever you need to tell me is important, but you're going to have to wait because I'm having a conversation with your mom. And right now, that's important.
Mhm.
And like, so my kids know it kind of goes back to that same thing of like, if dad says something and they don't really like it, then they come to mom and ask mom
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
hope that there's a difference there.
Right.
But like from an early age, Jordan have created this atmosphere at our home that is like, no, I am on your dad's team.
We're a unit.
Your dad is on my team, and nothing that you do or say can change that.
Mhm.
And so like they know that um they're second
Yeah.
to me
Yeah.
and to him,
Yeah.
and that, like, and that's not wrong.
Right. I was gonna say, I think sometimes we're afraid to establish that because we think it's gonna look unkind, but it's actually the best thing for our kids.
Yeah, because guess what? What we do in our marriage right now,
Mhm.
good and bad, is really the baggage that our children will bring into their marriages.
Right.
Like, no pressure, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just like,
And he's sufficient in that too.
of course.
He's sovereign
Yes.
over that too,
Like,
but
it's one
yeah.
of those times where it's just like, you have got, if you want your marriage to be different,
Yeah.
you have to work.
Right.
Like, Jordy and I just didn't get here because we were like, oh, we need this to be better.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
can we hope that it will be?
Yeah.
No. We have been to counseling. We're on the wait list for another counselor because we've changed counselors again.
Mhm.
Um, our kids know that when we enjoy time away from them,
Yeah. Mhm.
and a lot of parents that I know would never be caught saying that
Mhm.
because, you know, and so like, and maybe it's a babysitter thing. Like maybe you don't invest in your spouse because you have to hire a babysitter, and like I know how that feels to
Right.
live away from family. So a
Yeah.
lot of times when we lived away, like we would just have friend groups, like I'll keep your kids and y'all go out, and then when it's our turn you keep our kids, and we'll go out. And so it's like it was never
Yeah.
a payment thing,
Right.
so it wasn't this added pressure to like find a babysitter. Do we trust a babysitter? Do we have money to pay a babysitter? Like no. So maybe it's just that you just do for one, and they'll do for you, sort of thing.
Right.
So that way you can have that time together. I would also say that when you not only date your spouse, but go away on a vacation with your spouse.
Mhm.
Okay. Like maybe it's just you're going to Shreveport or
Vacation
Jackson.
Hallie is so much more pleasant.
I know.
You know, you get there and
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh, you.
Yes.
I
And
remember you."
you get to eat hot food and complete sentences
Yeah.
and stay up
You
late,
literally
sleep
can't be
in.
reached. Like, if there's an
I know.
urgency, someone else will have to do
Yes.
it.
So every
Yeah.
year, Jordy and I plan to go on a vacation together, just the
Mm.
two of us. And it doesn't have to be this long thing.
Right, right.
It can literally be like,
Or far.
oh yeah, it could be like overnight. I've known people who get a hotel in town.
Uh-huh. There's
Okay.
Airbnbs.
Like, come on.
Mhm.
This is easy.
Mhm.
Like, but again, it's taking the time to do it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means you actually write it on the calendar,
Mhm.
which sounds really stupid because it did to me. I was like, Jordy, we are not writing this down. Like,
Yeah.
we shouldn't have to, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
But then it turned into like, if I don't,
Uh-huh.
then I'm just gonna keep saying, oh,
Mhm.
I'll do that. I'll
Yeah.
do that. And I never will.
Mhm.
And so I think that you've got to be intentional. But also like don't overthink it.
Mhm.
Okay. It doesn't have to be this big to do
Yeah.
all the time. Because again, that puts too much pressure on ourselves that we may not live up to that expectation. Right. And so don't overthink it. Don't wait to get it all together because that tomorrow, when we might get it together, may not come.
Right.
And I've known a lot of people in the recent years who have lost their spouse, both old and young,
Mhm.
and um, they don't have that anymore. It's
Yeah.
gone, and like, and so like, don't wait. Don't
Yeah.
wait till your kids get older. Don't wait till you feel better or you
Mhm.
look better or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
just do it today.
Mhm.
plan it today, go tonight, like,
Yeah, don't wait. I feel like even the part of putting it on the calendar and like this is not just actionable. This is our heart posture as
yeah.
well. But like if you wait to look in the crevices of time where you don't have a soccer game, you don't have a dance recital, and you don't have a work thing, and you don't whatever, it's not gonna happen.
And,
It actually has to be prioritized.
Jordy and I really started doing better at this, differently at this, when like it could literally be like lunch, y'all. It okay. It doesn't have to be like a
Free
nighttime.
childcare.
Yeah, right. Hello, school, you know?
Yeah.
Or maybe your
Uh-huh.
kids go to Mother's Day out
Mhm.
on a specific day. Go on those days.
Yeah.
Like go
Even
when
just go drink a free cup of coffee at their office, like, like, what if
yes.
it doesn't
Yes.
whatever that looks
It
like.
does not have to be at nighttime for
Mhm.
dinner, followed up with a movie and a walk down a
Yeah,
street. Like,
yeah. Like, if I
n
can't do it all, I don't want any.
no,
Yeah,
exactly. Do you see?
right.
It goes into the same thing. Like, no, like just go up here and get
Uh-huh.
some Chick-fil-A and eat it in the car and just have an intentional conversation with your spouse.
Mhm,
How can I pray for you? How can I what's going on in your life?
mhm,
Like, where are you struggling? Where, do you need encouragement from me? Like
mhm,
like if you're not asking those questions, then you're not studying your spouse. Like you don't know. And they're going to give those answers to other people
mhm.
if they ask, right?
Right,
And like I want to know first.
right,
Like I don't want to
right,
have to find out information about my spouse from somebody else because
right.
I haven't taken the time to ask,
Mm,
you know? And so like I want to be like, I want Jordy to be so tired of saying this one thing about himself because he's already told me about it. Like
yeah,
it kind of goes like back to like preaching. This is the most tangible way for me.
yeah,
It's like all the church members in the whole world could just, tell Jordy, like, you are an amazing pastor. You did great. And the sermon
mhm,
was awesome. But I want him to know first from me.
right.
Why? Because I trump all church members.
Yeah, no yeah,
And so like I want him to know how I feel about him
yeah,
and that I think he is incredible and totally gifted and just remarkable sometimes,
yeah,
and I want him to know that from me.
right,
I don't want him to hear about it through somebody else that I said this about him.
mhm,
I want him to know it from me
right.
because
And that's no one else's responsibility but yours,
no. Yeah.
you know?
And so it just feels like just intentionality, purposefulness,
Mm,
those are things that changed our marriage. Um and I would just to say that like serve each other in a way that you're appreciative and you're not critical.
yeah,
And that with this expectation, because there are some expectations that are good,
mhm,
and one of them is to not expect anything in return.
yeah,
Right. You do the dishes when you see that your wife is literally running around with the chicken with her head cut off because, like that's kind of how Jordan and I used to see things is like I used to think if he sees all these dishes in the sink, he's going to think I'm lazy and that I haven't had time to do it today and that like I should have had time to do it, but I didn't do it and that I'm lazy and that
mhm,
but really what he sees is that I've been busy with two kids at home all day long.
yeah,
I've been cleaning up after them all day, changing diapers all day, doing
mhm,
homework, taking them to practice, coming home. And literally have not been home.
mhm,
And so he'll come in and be like, okay, let me help you. And the way that I can help you is doing the dishes
mhm,
because you are tired and you haven't had time. And that's okay. And I love you anyway.
yeah,
Like that's how that plays out.
mhm,
And not a, why didn't you get this done?
yeah,
Don't you see that this thing is full? Well, yeah,
yeah,
I do. But like,
mhm,
and so like be a team with one another. Like there are not certain chores or things to do per spouse,
yeah,
like no. Some days may be easier for Jordy to serve me and others it may be easier for me to serve him, right?
right,
There are gonna be
yeah,
different times where, he may not be home for a long time during the day because of whatever's going on. And
mhm,
so like I'll be out there in the yard cutting the grass on
Yeah.
the mower. Why? Not because I'm some awesome mower, but
Mhm.
sometimes mowing does take me away from being needed elsewhere.
Yeah. I can
Um,
relate. Yeah.
but also, like, it's a way that I can serve him. I know that he
Mhm.
needs to do that and wants to get it done, but he doesn't have time to do it. And I don't need him to thank me for that. I just need
Right.
him to see, like, man, Jessica, thank you so much for helping me out.
Yeah.
Like, what a relief it is
Mhm.
that I don't have to think about that now because you took it off my plate.
Yeah.
And so I think that just kind of, I've heard some people say before, like, out serving one another, right?
Mhm.
Just outserve your spouse
Yeah.
and have no expectation in return.
Mm.
Um, I would say just rejoice in the spouse that you have and not wishing for one that you don't.
Mm.
Because again, like, they're flawed, they're sinful, they have fleshly moments, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
that is your teammate, that is your spouse, that is the person that should literally know everything about you.
Yeah.
I used to think it was corny that people would be like, "Oh, my husband's my best friend." I thought that was so stupid. But really, like,
Yeah.
Jordy is my friend.
Mhm.
He and I miss that friendship with him when I'm not there.
Yep.
And so, like, celebrate who your spouse is instead of being like, well, golly, so and so's husband, Andrew's a lot better off than Jordy. Like, at least he is home at this time. I mean, like,
Yeah.
we just, you
Mhm.
cannot be in this comparison game.
Mm-mm, you won't
You,
win with that.
you can't. Like, you have to celebrate what is right now
Yeah.
and just say, how can I help you? I know you have a busy week. How can
Yeah.
I help you?
Mhm.
And when you do that, like, that becomes attractive in a way to your spouse that you may not know, right? Because, like,
Yeah.
we view attractiveness like outward appearance, right?
Right. But it's also the way they make you feel,
Yeah.
you know?
And how they serve you and how
Yeah.
they show love to you,
Mhm.
right? And so I just think that oftentimes we just think that it is supposed to look one way, but really love and affection and devotion come from washing the dishes or
Yeah.
helping me fold clothes because I hate doing that.
I know. Yeah.
Or like, hey, we've been really busy, but we really need to clean this house. What do you want to do? Like,
Yeah.
what do you want to do around the house? Okay, well, I'll do this and you do that. And we'll have the kids do this. I'll just be done with it. Like,
Mhm.
that is more helpful than be like, why didn't you get all this done?
Yeah.
Come on. Like, what have you been doing all day? Mm,
Yeah.
mm-mm,
Mhm.
no. Um, so I would say, be quick to forgive,
Yeah.
be patient with one another in this time. Be full of grace, be kind to one another. And I would tell you that probably one of the biggest things that has helped Jordy and I, um, and this will kind of be like the last thing, tangible action plan thing for anybody who can use this is thank you for sharing moments. And we tell people this a lot, like, you need to have moments together. Like, let's say, for example, Jordy is irritating the mess out of me.
Never
And
happened, but
no,
hypothetically.
hypothetically speaking, if he
Yeah.
ever irritated me so much.
Yeah.
Um, but because, again, it's not really the toilet paper's fault, right?
Right.
It's not really the dishes. It's something else
It's
that's
a
been
deeper
bothering me,
thing. Yeah.
right? Okay, so when you're feeling those feelings of like, he is irritating me, like, why can't he pick up all his clothes off the floor and put them in the closet? Like, but you're also mad because he didn't come home at the time that he said he was going to come home last night,
Mhm.
or something came up and he had to be there longer, or
Mhm.
he's choosing to go to the deer stand instead of sit in the
Mhm.
couch in the living room, right? Like,
Mhm.
could be a whole multitude of scenarios. But when I become frustrated or upset with Jordy,
Mhm.
I will come to him and say, I need to thank you for sharing a moment. And what that means is it is a clue to him that says, number one, I want you to listen to me.
Mhm.
I want you to understand me. I don't want you to fix me. I don't want you to, like, become defensive or like problem solver. I want you to listen to what I'm saying. And his only response can be, thank you for sharing.
Mm.
And let me tell you, sometimes a lot of times, it hurts to hear
Yeah.
what they have to say
Mhm.
because a lot of times those things happen unintentionally, right?
Right.
And so that was never your intention or your message that you were trying to say
Yeah.
when whatever happened. Um, but it feels small, right? Like, oh,
Mm.
I'm just not going to share that with them because it's
Yes.
insignificant. But if the fact that you're thinking about it a lot
Mhm.
and it's changing your attitude and the way that you
Mhm.
treat your spouse, then
Mhm.
obviously it's a little bit bigger than what you think it is.
It also, if you never tell your spouse the way that they've hurt you or made you
Oh yeah.
feel, it actually communicates you don't really care.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you don't really care if it gets better and you
Yeah.
don't really
Even though you
like,
might.
because the idea is that um you're striving so much, you've communicated that like it didn't affect you that much. And
Right.
like it actually should,
Yes.
because that's your spouse.
Or that if you don't talk about it, it'll just get better,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it's like, no, it'll actually get worse if you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
no, because you can't do what you don't know, right?
Right.
And like I have found, and this is like no shot at Jordy at all, but like if I don't tell him, he genuinely doesn't know.
Yeah.
And that could be on a multitude of things. Like
Mhm.
if we tell couples all the time, like talk before sex, during sex, and after sex, right? Because that's usually it could be a hard and difficult spot for a lot of couples. Okay. Well, you have to talk about it. And and what you say and what they say is important because he didn't know that I didn't like this, but he thought I liked this. Or,
Mhm.
or like when I reacted to him and I was really snippy and grouchy and grumpy, well,
Mhm.
he didn't know, like, what did he do? He didn't
Right.
do anything. Well,
Right.
it was something else. Like, so
Mhm.
like you have to have these conversations
Mhm.
so that your spouse knows because they literally can't do what they don't know. Like
Right.
Jordy cannot read my mind.
Mhm.
As much as I wanted him to and
Mhm.
thought that he should,
Yeah.
it's impossible. Like he cannot serve me and love me and maybe ask for forgiveness or
Mhm.
um, be encouraging to me
Yeah.
if I don't open my mouth and tell him. Again, that feels very raw, very
Mhm.
vulnerable, very exposing, right?
Yeah. Because you have to believe that you have needs
Yes.
first to do that.
Yes. And that they're worth mentioning,
Right.
right? Because that's kind of how it is in our prayer life too. Like, oh, well, it's just this really small thing in comparison to this really big
Mhm.
thing that I desire. So, like, I'll just focus on this bigger thing instead of this smaller thing,
And it can't be
or
viewed,
vice versa.
yeah, and then that can't be viewed as nagging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, when we have thank you for sharing moments, it allows us to say, hey, this is bothering me and it's causing some riff in my heart towards you about
Mhm.
it. Or really, it could be that I'm struggling with something hard in
Mhm.
here in my
Mhm.
heart. Um, and I need you to know that it's not what you're doing. It's just that I'm processing
Mhm.
this change, this molding that the Lord is putting on me, and changing me into being more like Jesus. Um, and I may be a little bit grumpy during that time,
Yeah.
but it's not what you're doing.
Mhm.
And so then that gives Jordy opportunities to just be like, how can I pray for you in that? Like, how can I be intentional
Yeah.
and encouraging and uplifting to you during that time? Or it's that, it's a time where he or we have to ask for forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've hurt our spouse in a way that we didn't know because we thought it was just really insignificant.
Mhm.
And then it became hurtful and painful.
Right.
And so have those moments together where, because so now when Jordy's like, I have a thank you for sharing moment, I'm like, okay, what is it?
Yeah.
Because my intention is never to hurt him.
Mhm.
It is never to create space from him. It's never
Mhm.
to be, unloving to him. Like it's not, but a
Mhm.
lot of times it is perceived that way.
Well, and I think on the opposite side of that, like sometimes we hold those thoughts louder and
Oh
we
yeah.
go, well, that's not his intention. He didn't mean to do that. He's
Right.
not meaning, he is trying to love me his best. I'm not going to say anything at all.
Yeah.
And like that also can't be
Yeah.
what
And
happens.
look, this if you're in a situation where you're being abused or
Right.
emotionally, physically, psychologically, like that is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is not a chance for that person to be like to justify their actions. So like hear me when I say
Mm-hmm.
there has never been abuse in my marriage at all
Mm-hmm.
on any level. So like if you're struggling with that,
Mm-hmm.
then that is not okay in any stretch of the means. And
Right.
you need to seek someone out from your church or maybe a counselor or
Mm-hmm.
maybe a friend at this point,
Right.
and voice that to them. So when I say thank you for sharing moments are not justification for abuse. Okay.
Right.
However, it is a means to say, hey, you said this to me and it hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Or I heard you say that to somebody
Mm-hmm.
else. Why did you say that? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
um, or, like you were talking to this girl and I became, you know, I felt undeserving. I felt like
Mm.
threatened in this
Yeah.
way, like, and so like just make sure that
Mm-hmm.
you're being, it's in those situations,
Yeah.
not justification for
Right.
actual purposeful intentional sin.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I just think overall this idea of
Mm.
intentionality, dying to self, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just this constant like, and give yourself a break.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, there is so much going on in life and in the world and social media and movies and all the things.
Yeah.
Give yourself a break,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's that you take a walk with your spouse outside after the kids go to bed or you just sit outside.
Yeah. We live on our back porch a lot.
Yeah.
Our neighbors know everything,
Yeah.
probably.
It's just like you have to find those times that are intentional because in the time where I was dealing with control and lack of trust and all
Mm-hmm.
of that, that was a precursor to something very significant that happened in our lives probably 3 years later.
Yeah.
And had I not been sensitive to the Lord and allowed him to speak to me, I don't know that Dory and I would have survived that time in our life.
Mm.
And that time in our life was not that long ago.
Yeah.
And but because the Lord changed both Jordy and I during that time,
Mm.
we were able to weather the storm.
Wow.
And let me just be frank, it was hard. It was a
Yeah.
very, 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 very dark time in my marriage,
Mm.
and in our family's life, um, and it was very painful. Um, but the Lord, again, I was like, I don't understand a single bit of what's happening right now,
Mm.
and I am desperate to see your goodness. And like a lot of times, you just have to um, borrow someone else's faith for a little bit
Yeah.
until you can stand back on your own.
Yeah. You do.
you know and so like this is not a podcast of how awesome my marriage is, because Jordy and I still are
Mm.
working and
Yeah.
being intentional. I mean, there are times like right now, like we've just moved and we're
Yep.
doing all the things and we've got a lot going on, and so like,
Can be ships in the night.
yeah, we're just literally just like, hey, okay, we've got to spend time with one another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because once you start spending time with one another, you just desire it so much
That's
more.
right. Yeah.
It's the same thing with the Lord. Like once you start spending time with the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
you desire it more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
And that's the same for your spouse. It's just like, allow yourself to be loved by them. Like
Yeah.
Jordy is a hugger.
Mm-hmm.
What, you would never know that. He's a hugger of me.
Yeah.
If anybody tries to hug Jordan, he's like, whoop. Like, you know, but he's
Yeah.
a hugger of me. Well, I don't enjoy hugs all the time.
Yeah.
And so I remember just this time of my life just being like, Lord, I just want to hug Jordy. I don't want him to feel loved by me through this hug.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the mornings or at night when I'm trying to do all the things, all the tasks, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That I would just stop
Mm-hmm.
and embrace him and love him and hug him. And
Yeah.
that sounds so stupid to pray. But that's where I was. That's what
No,
he
but when
needed.
you're so task oriented and that's his need, like him seeing you pause,
Yeah.
what I think would help me the most to give you what would help you the most in
Mhm.
this moment is like
Yeah.
a
My attention to
physical
say,
view. Yeah.
this is not important,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but you are far more important.
Yeah.
And you are what I desire. And so
Yeah.
like your marriage
Mm-hmm.
is a true representation of how Christ loves the church, right?
Yeah.
And the similarities there between marriage and parenthood and the
Mm-hmm.
Lord is just
Yeah.
insane.
Wow.
It's so crazy. So,
That's so good. Jessica, thank you.
of course.
That's not sufficient for for everything that you've shared with us to think about. Like it's just been so good and so rich and honest, but so needed.
Mm,
So needed.
yeah,
So thank you.
sure.
I
It's
appreciate
been
it.
it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor.
Yeah.
Like I remember your podcast came out and I was like, "Oh my gosh." Cuz like Jordy and I knew you when you were a
Yeah.
teenager
Yeah.
and now you're a grown up and you're
Yeah. Still don't
literally
have it together,
but you're killing it,
oh, thank you.
and so it's just been so sweet for us to come full
Well,
circle
thanks.
here. So,
Yeah.
thank you for
Well,
having me.
this won't be your last time on this mic, but thank you for this time.
Sure. Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming, and thank y'all so much for listening in. And we will see you next week on the Saltworks.
This is my story. This is your story.